So, hello everyone, and welcome to the CNCF Harbor Satellite meeting, where today we are going to discuss the part of the satellite which is, related to ground control. And so, the goal of today's meeting is to, brainstorm and sketch out how the behavior of ground control should be, and how this ground control should behave in respect to satellite. And then in the second part, we maybe also look at the current PRs that we have from Roald and from Prasant, that we can look at those things and move forward from there. Okay, so we have, if you already remember from our few weeks ago when we talked about the satellite and we focused more on the, let's say, the satellite core part. And now I think before moving on, we should maybe focus a bit now on the ground control part. This is something that Prasant, who is the LFX mentee for this period, I think from June to August, probably, right, Prasant? If I'm
Yeah,
correct.
exactly.
And I think Prasant should work here on the ground control part and sketch out and develop the prototype here for the ground control. And then we have the third part, which is going to be the container runtime related part, right? And I think when we have ground control, then we have the part with the container runtime. We can focus, in my opinion, we can focus then on the second use case that we have. So as a reminder, we have this sketched out those three use cases, and those three use cases have been well, this is the first use case, like the classic one, where replicate from real registry, and then we have the second use case, which involves Spiegel and container runtime. And I think for the second use case, we would need to have some modification on Spiegel side, right? So then once we have the ground control part complete and the container runtime complete, and we have proven this use case to work, we can probably will move on to the second use case. And by that time, we think that we can figure out how this is working with Spiegel and how this Spiegel needs to be extended to support this use case. But today, let's discuss this part on the ground control here. And I would suggest that we brainstorm and identify what, in our opinion, the ground control should be capable of. What is the information that ground control should provide? I mean, we have a rough overview about this, but let's dive a bit deeper into that and see how the things can work out, right? So I suggest we start from the UI and take a look how we can. So in my opinion, we need to make sure that we change as little as possible on the hardware side, right? So I think the difficulty here is to introduce a fundamental change in hardware registry to make satellite work, and we should minimize the effort here. And one of the suggestions from my side would be, maybe I'm wrong here, or maybe there's some better options, is to use the existing capabilities of the replication, right? Let me just log in quickly. Okay. I need to authenticate. Okay, so one option would be to use the replication capabilities. So meaning we have a registry. Let me just create a registry here. Just I'm creating myself here. Okay, take a look at how this is working. Right. right? So this is just, and so we could, so imagine you have some project in Harbor and you would like to say, okay, I want to have some of those projects to be replicated to my satellite, right? And my intention was that you, for example, create a replication rule, right? And let's say I just call this yeah, let's call this a remote registry, like satellite, and we create a kind of register a satellite as a registry here. And then we can create replication rules, right? So the replication rules involves the images that you would like to replicate, no? Library, and then project ABC, project, not project, but repo 1. And you want to have all the text from this repo, right? So you can select the text and then the labels. Based on labels or text, you can do the replication and you create the destination. You want to have it in satellite. You can do push-based replication probably, and then you create this satellite 1. Okay, to have lowercase everything. So, and then you can run this, activate this replication rules, and every time you push something to library, it will automatically replicate the satellite, right? So this is my intention, how it can be done. And the reason behind this is we have on Harbor side, we have a standardized interfaces for the registry adapters. So every registry here in the dropdown has a follows interface, and this interface is standardized, and we can create a new interface in Harbor, which we can, as it's standardized, it's fairly simple to bring this upstream. We would have an interface which will be called Harbor Satellite, and then you can select this interface is called Harbor Satellite, and then it will be registered as a registry. And then you have like the endpoint, which is probably going to be not the endpoint of the satellite, but it's going to be the endpoint of the ground control, right? So we have to think this as we have to think about this as a kind of as a proxy or as a gateway, not as the satellite itself, because you cannot replicate the satellite because the satellite is not reachable from this network, right? So you will basically create here, provide here the URL of ground control. Then of course you can have access ID and access secret, and here you can, with the endpoint URL, you can what I thought is like we can use the endpoint URL as a way of grouping satellites, right? So you could use the URL, the path site, for grouping of, to address a group of satellites, right? So for example, you create you register an endpoint, let's say for group A, for group B, for group C, and then you can replicate to those groups A, B, C, right? And then in ground control, you define what is part of group A and what is part of group B, right? And the option here is to define, do we have a label-based replication? Not label-based replication, a label-based grouping, right? So like you have different labels on ground control, and then depending to which label the satellite belongs to, we'll get the replication. But we can brainstorm about this in short. But let me finish the endpoint. So we register a satellite endpoint here, and then we can use all the capabilities that replications provide of Harbor, and then we can replicate the images that we want to this part of this endpoint, right? And in this way, we would have as little as possible, let's say, modification needed to Harbor, in my opinion. Of course, there would be much better options if we would integrate ground control directly into Harbor, so that you have something like distributions, right? Maybe we need to investigate this option here as well. I'm not sure if we could use this distributions capabilities that exist for Dragonfly and Kraken. The problem is, frankly, I know nobody except of the companies who are behind Dragonfly and Kraken who are using this in combination with Harbor. So this is really the thing, that there are not so many users of this functionalities, at least in my knowledge, since I know like 4 or 5 years that I'm in the project. I have maybe answered 1 or 2 questions regarding Dragonfly and Kraken on Slack, right? Or there was even 1 or 2 questions regarding that, right? So, and the deepest question that I got there was like, what is Dragonfly and how does it work, right? But never something like how to set it up, how, like, never something that was beyond the basic. Maybe we can use this one, right? Because this can be an option as well, right? So let's take a look. HTTPS, google.com. This endpoint start with HTTP or HTTPS, okay?
I think you're missing a slash there.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks. Wondering if it's really need to be uppercase. It has to be uppercase. No, it was 1 T too much. Okay, good. Let's try this one, ASDF, and then, because this distribution capabilities has a bit more options, right? So if we take a look at library, for example, then there is this option of preheating, right? So, and this means that you could then select the Dragonfly. It's called preheat. I'm not sure why it's called preheat. And then you can select the repositories in the tags that you would like, and labels that you would like to, to replicate, right? So maybe we could use this option as well, but I need to investigate more into the code side of this.
So in all these cases, I'm guessing we assume that the satellite component has access to the Harbor API.
Good question. I would say no.
Or like, sorry, I mean the ground control has access to the Harbor instance. It must, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the question here is like, how much access does ground control need from Harbor, right? So if we, let's say, if we use this approach with, let's say, preheating, right, or like the distributions, right? So distribution, let's say a new provider, like on the Dragonfly, Kraken, we have satellite here, right? So this can also be, or the replication capability. So in both cases, right? So let's assume they're equally possible. I think we wouldn't need to have that much of connectivity from ground control to the Harbor registry. So what we would need is, because the registry and the adapter in the registry, in the adapter in the Harbor, would compile this list of images that needs to be fetched from the satellite, and it will provide this list to ground control, right? So this will be the direction of flow would be rather from the registry into ground control, and then the satellite would connect to ground control to fetch the data, to fetch the list, and the satellite would connect to the OCI interfaces of the registry to fetch those images. So it would not connect to the Harbor API. So it will use only the OCI specification.
Yeah, so I mean, like, then the communication between Harbor and ground control would be reversed, right? Like what I mean is the first request would come from satellite to ground control, and be like, what images do I need to pull, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then ground control would need to be able to get this information from Harbor somehow. So it would either ask then the Harbor API to first of all figure out the grouping as you talked about, which I do agree with would be a nice feature to have. The ground control could be configured to have multiple groupings, but then it would need to talk to the Harbor API somehow to go, get this registry and then figure out what images are linked to that registry to then be able to return the list.
And in your walkthrough, Vadim, you mentioned that ground control is a proxy or a gateway. So how exactly would the image pool flow look like there? So how does Harbor do that replication? What is that replication in reality?
So the adapter. So if you implement an adapter, let's say you have a registered registry and you have implemented this adapter, and this adapter is basically, it uses on one hand the OCI specification, and on the other hand it uses the specific API calls that needs to be done for the specific registry. So for example, most of those use cases are related to authentication, but there are some other use cases that are accessing the API as well. For example, GitLab has as well as the API for the OCI specification, right? But it also accesses the API of GitLab to fetch the group information, right? So the adapter is basically the one that ships the data as well, right? It's not only the one who is talking to the remote interfaces. Yes, it does it, but it also ships the data. So it's the one who takes the images from its own registry and pushes to the other registry. So
so it's a pull through. Okay, it's a pull through proxy, basically.
Yeah, I think I was a bit of when I said about proxy, I didn't use the incorrect terms. I would like if we think proxy is not the right word here, right? Because
okay. Sorry,
it will not be used as shipping OCI images. So ground control will not have information about the layers and the blobs.
Does it have the binary though? The image binary?
No.
Okay. So then it's not a proxy.
It is not a. Yeah, it's not a proxy.
Because it doesn't store any information of the image itself, right? So the flow is not like satellite makes a call to ground control makes a call to Harbor, pulls the image into ground control, and then satellites pulls from ground control. So that would be a pull through proxy. But instead, in this diagram, satellite pulls directly from remote.
Exactly.
Okay. So what does ground control do then?
So the functionality of ground control is first, it contains the list of the images that are meant for this satellite location.
Okay.
So this is one thing that satellite ground control has. It has the list of images that are meant for this satellite. It has an overview. What are the satellites? So it has the grouping of satellites, and it is also authenticating the satellites in a way so that the satellite can register itself. So it's self-registration and kind of identification, right? So who are you? And then based on this information, this is what ground control knows, and it can talk to Harbor, right? And it receives information from Harbor, right? So it has this capabilities.
Can we write this down? Because this will be basically the acceptance criteria for ground control.
Okay, that's a good point. Let's write it down. Should we write it here? No? Yeah, probably, yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Let's just have it in the because this will be the basis of the tickets that you will have to do.
So
like the individual pieces of work.
Does this mean that ground control is a stateful application then? Because my thought has always been that it's piggybacking off Harbor, but now we're kind of describing something different.
Okay, let's think through that correctly. Is ground control a stateless application? I would say it is not stateless because it needs to know about the satellite. It has somewhere a state where probably it's going to have a database. But in overall, there should be somewhere a state. It should understand and know what are the satellites, and it should track the satellites and identify what images are meant for which satellite location.
Yeah, but
I
I
would
mean,
say,
does
yeah,
this
yeah.
have to be? Because it's like you can turn it around also and say that it's the satellite's configuration. But it's like, yeah, I see both cases. But the alternative would be to basically give specific credentials to each satellite or give it a specific path that would identify the group that it's looking for. But that also then in turn makes it difficult to modify these things in the future. So I see both points.
Do the individual satellite components handle certificates themselves and so on for authentication purposes?
I don't know.
Because that is a fundamental element in the network traffic. Because if we need to do HTTPS and we need to rotate the certificates, how are you going to rotate fleet-wide in a controlled manner?
Mm-hmm.
Ground control could do it, by the way. That's one way of doing it. Because it will, if it's stateful, which I think it has to be, then it will have like a status of the fleet itself, and you can do the logical groupings and whatever, and then you can rotate dynamically with it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think it's going to be difficult to make it stateless, right? I mean, we could fetch, like, we could fetch dynamically the API of Harbor, right? And identify so every time satellite requests, hey, what are the images for me? And then ground control can fetch the Harbor, identify the images that needs to be, or compile the list of images that need to be present on the satellite. And then it can satellite identify, hey, do I have a delta or not? And fetch this information. This is like, we can make this part of ground control stateless, right? So there's like the storing of the images, we can make them stateless, or like push the state down to Harbor. Then the state of the satellite registration, the self-registration, right? We need to store it somewhere.
Yeah, and if we want also then to track images that have been cached on the local satellite registry, we obviously want a way for, after all images, after the job has been completed, we want a way for the registry then also to report and go, I've pulled these images successfully, and then for ground control to store them to be able to track this information.
Exactly.
Also, a problem with that do you want to use ground control as like a monitoring component as well?
I mean, Philipp
of
mentioned,
the fleet,
and I think
the fleet.
Yeah, I think it makes sense, right? So because you want to see in ground control, like, hey, did all satellites fetch the images, right? So are all satellites in sync, right? You want to maybe have a back channel where the satellites tells the ground control, hey, I have synchronized now all these images, right? And because we are on like low bandwidth connections where the let's say restart of the new application can only happen globally if everyone is in sync, right? And you want to make sure, like, to identify, hey, who is in sync and who is out of sync.
Yes.
Or still,
so if you go if you go with the stateless approach, that would mean that there needs to be some sort of constant communication between the individual satellite components and ground control. So either they push events towards ground control, and ground control only stores it in memory or caches it, doesn't really matter, or ground control needs to pull the individual satellite components on an interval. Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Phil.
I'm just feeling like the more we describe this, is like we can't get away with that stateless ground control. It has to be stateful.
I'm feeling the same thing, because where I wanted to end up with that is that you have to assume that network connectivity can be lost at any point in time. So how do you know what was the last successful state of the satellite if you can't talk to it in that model?
This actually would solve one, or make some things a bit more logical. I guess it depends also on how Harbor works. With that, ground control could be like a pseudo registry. I don't know how that would work. I don't know how Harbor's replication when it kicks in, but pointing out ground control and saying, here's the ground control registry, and then just having Harbor post, here are all the images that you're supposed to have, but not actually push them.
Yeah, so this is the intention. So the intention is to have an adapter that does not move the images itself. It just kind of records the information, the metadata about the images. What are the name, where are they, and the state, not state, the basic the URI, right? So the URL of the images, and creates a list of those images, for ground control. So the ground control can use this, or the ground control forward this information to satellite, so that satellite can just push this image directly. So I wouldn't move data between registry and ground control or layer info.
I like this approach. I like this quite a bit, because then ground control doesn't have to cache anything in terms of the image binaries themselves, and satellite can pull. It just knows, hey, you are part of this logical grouping, like this part of the fleet. You need to pull these immediately. And this is where you find the image, and this is your metadata. But the actual pulling, the actual transfer of the image data is between satellite and Harbor, which I like, or the remote registry.
Because also a big advantage here, we can leverage the performance capabilities of Harbor and S3 buckets. All this HR parts of Harbor we can leverage when we kind of have a parallel pool from thousands of registries here.
So what I'm hearing is ground control is a mix of a monitoring tool, a semi DNS or whatever you want to call it, with the endpoints, where you basically group your fleet into subfleets with it, and just basically metadata information for the individual satellite components on what to pull and from where.
Yeah, that's a good summary. Okay, so
while you write this down, Vadim, I have one issue with this approach, that this is super tightly coupled to Harbor.
Yeah, it is somehow hard. Yeah,
it is super tightly coupled, unfortunately, because it all relies on the adapter capability of the Harbor platform. I'm not saying we need to solve it immediately, but let's not architect something that only works in a very, very specific case like this. What if I want to use ground control to replicate from Google Image Registry?
Well, in that case, ground control wouldn't like. The only thing that is Harbor specific here would be the list of images.
Well, the replication functionality of Harbor.
Well, that would be one way of defining which images should be pushed or pulled by satellite. That could be something that you could configure in ground control in itself.
I would much prefer that approach to it, where you configure it in ground control instead of the adapter way that Vadim demoed in the beginning.
Well, I see Harbor as one interface. If you really want to build multiple solutions, to configure ground control, I don't really see how this would limit that possibility.
Okay.
I agree. So the thing is that when you mentioned like super coupled, right? Harbor will be the one who is capable of well, it's one way how you can define what images should be present on the satellite, right? So you probably will have some other options as well. So if ground control has an API, like let's say we have an API on this side, and we have probably an API on this side, and you could create your own UI or your own tool that compiles this list of images and can provide this list of images to ground control, and then ground control can use this as well, right? So if you have a let's say a middleman here that is capable of talking to Google Artifactory, fetch the information from Google Artifactory and make it accessible to ground control, then ground control can use this information.
I'm fine with that. What I'm trying to highlight is that let's not write ground control in a manner that is solely dependent on the Harbor replication and adapter functionality.
Okay, I agree. It should not be the case. So this is what I had kind of when in retrospect, when I think about this, there is no information that are Harbor specific in ground control. So Harbor will only provide its replication capabilities and methods to compile this list of images, and the adapter will translate this list in a way that ground control can understand, right? So the adapter is the only one that is connecting Harbor to ground control.
Okay, so there's a missing element in the diagram then between ground control and the remote registry, which is the adapter.
Yes, so we need to change this flow here from this direction to let's say this direction, and this and I'll call this the registry adapter. It's not registry adapter. It's let me just quickly look it up. That's the wrong one. Let's say like I think it's how do they call it? They call it this is the let's take a look at this Huawei adapter. This is the adapter. And these are the different adapters. This is the adapter interface.
I think registry adapter is a good name for that link there.
You think registry adapter, right? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah. But it needs to be on the diagram.
It needs to be on the...
Yeah.
That's good. Okay, so we have ground control. So let's say the ground control capabilities. So it's the fleet management. Then the other one was device or satellite registration, deregistration. It's part of the fleet management, right? But still, let's satellite registration. Satellite registration. What's unregistered? Deregistration or unregistration? Or
doesn't matter. We'll fix the grammar later.
Yeah. And then authentication. Authentication, right?
I think fleet management is a bit too generic. Like monitoring is definitely a part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Then fleet management was one. What about the monitoring? On the monitoring side is the replication status, right?
Like a state tracking would be like a good way to call it that.
Yeah, I agree.
Or state monitoring.
Yeah. The monitoring of replications.
Yep.
Okay, so this is one of the capabilities. Then should we put this under fleet management or under the grouping?
We can keep it separate.
We can this the grouping and labeling of images should let's keep it separate, right? So how can we the grouping. How would we phrase it? Grouping and
like logical mapping of image groups to satellite groups or something, because you map like these are the images for these groups.
logical mapping of image sets to
Satellite groups.
groups, exactly. So we can maybe have a kind of N and M relationship, right? So like we can have a one to N relationship. So where you have one list is mapped to multiple satellites, or we have like multiple lists can map to multiple satellites, right? Makes it make it more complicated. But I think let's keep it one to N, because we can have multiple one to N relationships, right? So you can have one replication to ground control, and they have the same replication to the same group, right? So you can have multiple one to Ns, and it's easier to manage like five one to Ns than N to Ms.
Yes.
Okay, then we have state monitoring and replication. This is what it also does. What else? What do we discuss? What did we discuss as well?
I think
what is the state information that we store in ground control? If you talk about state, state monitoring of replications. So what is the information stored in ground control? Let's take a look at information.
Definitely, I would definitely have last connected timestamp. When was the last time the satellite component was reachable?
Yeah, it's called heartbeat. Heartbeat that what else? The remote state, right? So remote. So what we think is the remote state. Okay. What about configuration for satellites? Because we designed to be satellites to be, let's say, a zero touch application. So is it really zero touch? Maybe we need to kind of push configuration down to satellite in some way. For example,
that's a very good question.
To tell satellite, hey, don't update the container runtime, or don't use the internal registry. Use the registry that is available at this address, right?
From a purely practical infra perspective, I really like you said, zero touch. I don't want to SSH, or even sometimes I can't even SSH into the individual satellite components and make adjustments on the fly at that runtime, right? So I want some central component that can do that for me in an automated fashion, because this is not going to be a single vessel. This is going to be hundreds of them.
I would skip that for now. Keep it simple and then add it as a feature. Honestly,
like we don't have to implement all of this immediately, but I think it is wise to think of this from the actual real life use case perspective. We can scope it down to like, okay, we're not going to do that part, but we need to be mindful of this is what we're trying to accomplish with it.
Because this can be an option, but it also can be not relevant, right? So I think like having this in our mind maybe helps in designing things a bit, but without implementing it, right? And without making effort to making it work, just to keep in mind. And another information stored in ground control. This remote state of satellite, and then of course the images, right? So the list of images. Yeah, this is the list of images that needs to be. Yeah, and it's a bit of like remote state is kind of related to that, right? It's maybe just a flag. What interfaces should interfaces of ground control? So ground control should have two interfaces, like in a broad sense. The first interface is towards satellite. Clear, huh? I'm specific here. I'm not specific. I'm not specific. Interface for satellite, and then it should have another interface, one that registry adapter calls, right? And also other implementations can call this interface as well. And we can call this, how do we call this interface? This interface is the...
I'm okay with the adapter interface because that's what it does. No? It's an adapter to remote registries.
Yeah. Okay, we can start with that one. I'm not sure if it's the right one, but maybe I change my mind if I live with that for some time. Adapter interface.
Is ground control going to communicate with any remote registry without an adapter?
I think ground control would not communicate to any registry by itself.
Then it has to be adapter interface.
Yeah.
Or middleware. It doesn't, like, you don't have to call it an adapter, but there has to be an interface between ground control and the middleware actually facilitating the communication between the registry and ground control.
Yeah, and this interface will contain, or will basically accept list of images. It probably should. I think it should be also able to act. I'm using the word incorrectly now. As a proxy, for information. For example, what I mean here is, it should be able to use. For example, I have information about what are my groups, right? And it should have an API where I can change the grouping of satellites. This is something that you would normally maybe do in the satellite, maybe a satellite UI, right? So we can say, hey, this is my groups. These satellites belong together, things like this. And you should be able also to have this information provided via an API. So you can control this via an API and tell them, hey, these are the groups. This should be the configuration of the satellites. This should be what is the remote state of my satellites, right? So you want to maybe fetch this into some other systems. So we need to probably have an interface here. Let's flip this around. I would say control interface. I think it's a bit of broad interface. Yeah. Maybe just put a user in here.
Since we call it fleet management, we could call it the management interface.
Okay. And now the question of all questions, should ground control have a UI?
In the long run, probably. Immediately, absolutely not. It's going to take way too much time when you don't even have the proper core functionality.
It should have an API interface for now, huh?
Yeah, I would not spend time on the UI
Yeah.
on this at this point. And also the management interface can act like the UI interface. It doesn't affect that part.
Yeah.
Whether you make it from Postman, curl, or the UI, it's going to be REST API call either way.
Mm-hmm.
I think the adapter and the management interface should be separate.
Again, sorry.
So the adapter and the management interface should be separate. Management is not a subsection of the adapter.
Oh yeah, sorry, it was wrong place. Interface, no, interfaces for ground control, interface for satellites. Yeah, not wrong place. We have 3 interfaces, right? Adapter
Yes.
interface and the yeah, perfect. Thank you. Exactly.
Network flow is also relatively important here.
Can you elaborate a bit? What
Like how does the call flow look like from a network perspective? What has connectivity? What? You need to establish line of sight, basically. Where does ground control run? That's a question. Where does ground control run?
Well, it should. I mean, it can run next to harbor, but it can also run outside harbor.
Okay, because
So
satellite core needs line of sight to ground control. Ground control needs line of sight to whatever remote registry is trying to communicate with.
Yeah. Should we specify this? Line of sight? And
like sight as in seeing. So S, Sierra, Indigo, Golf, Hotel, Tango.
Sight, right? Line of sight. Yes. And satellite to ground control. Yeah. Ground control to harbor
registry. Yeah,
exactly. Let's keep it like this. And then we have, of course, the registry. Registry has no sight to ground control, except the adapter. Like if we have the adapter, registry not adapter to ground control.
With the asterisks of satellite core has to be able to run in detach mode.
Asterisks here?
No, like overall. I'm thinking about like network flow here. So ideally, satellite core has line of sight to ground control, but again, you need to assume that you lose connectivity at all times. That means satellite core has to be able to run on its own.
Oh yeah. Satellite core can run independently for indefinite amount of time.
Exactly, with local configuration. Yeah, so that will need some code in satellite core. So just so you replicate the configuration values from ground control into the individual satellite core components. So if they lose activity to ground control for whatever reason, maybe the service is down, maybe the network is down, it's still able to function with the remote registry on its own.
Yeah, now that we're talking about the line of sight, the question now here, okay, so imagine we have a list. We compiled a list in ground control that we sent out to satellite, and satellite is fetching these images, and it's all happy, right? So the question is like, how does the list of what is the list contains? Does it contains the hash values, right? So is this like, are we precisely and say, hey, this is the exact image that we want to have, really precise, or do we have text? And we know the text can change over time, right? So that whenever a satellite synchronizes the images from remote registry, it might get different result, right? So it means that even if ground control is down or ground control does not provide any list updates, the images can change underneath, right? And then should satellite be in sync here, or should we be precise? I mean, in my opinion, satellite should be precise, but
I agree.
You need, like, in a perfect world, tags would never have existed. But like what you would need to do is basically do like this. You give it a list of both tags and digest. So you give it like the multi-format like reference. So like where like you have both the image tag and the digest. And that is what satellite uses when it gets it from ground control. So then it gets to verify, so it can't update like if the remote registry were to update the tag reference, it would just check to see, is the digest the same? And if the digest isn't the same, like in a sense, we would say that once you pulled a tag, you never pull a tag again.
Yeah, the only thing that you move the tag to a different reference, right? So this is what happens. Okay, so let's note this down because this is an important part, and I think this is currently in a satellite. It's not implemented like this. We need to adapt that accordingly then. So how do we call it? We just call it image list, right? So I think it's or artifact list. We should not always talk about images. It's not a bit of outdated nowadays. We should talk about artifacts. Okay, artifact list is contains contains artifact repo tag and then repo tag and then what's this? It's
like the at digest. So it's like repo tag at digest.
Okay, so then we know, okay, this is like tag and this is the tag to this digest, right? So we are really precise that whatever we do this and whatever replicated here, then this satellite will fetch it. It will not fetch kind of a. It will not. We should make sure that it will never be out of sync with this list.
Yeah, you technically have the possible race condition of, for example, say somebody's using a latest tag, and from the point where the latest tag is pushed to ground control or informing ground control, to the point where satellite has fetched that tag reference and is now pulling it from remote registry. During that duration, the tag could, in theory, change to something different. So it's like it's actually like really important that we give digest references and maybe even only pull by digest, but then satellite, when it pushes, also pushes a tag reference for the digest it has pulled, basically, so to make sure that any image.
Exactly.
So that
I think fully agree.
That would even be like the simplest solution is basically, if there's a tag, include the tag, satellite then pulls by digest and then just retags the image locally to make sure that the tag reference is like actually configured.
We need to make sure that the tag is present because we want to make sure that when you deploy your application, that you deploy your application probably by tag, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So this is then working.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
I totally agree. Satellite should only pull specific, no extra abstraction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Full digest. Yeah.
Yeah. Digest and then tag it again, like kind of tag the digest to say, hey, this is currently the tag on this digest as of the list. Okay. Good. What else? I wanted to mention something as well.
You know what would be really cool to have in ground control? Like when you do the overview for your fleet, you could see the individual satellite components and what images they have with what exact digest they have. Like what Philip said basically. So once it pulls successfully, it pushes that information back to ground control, and you immediately see this member of this group of this fleet has these images with these digests, basically. So you're always certain of what they have on local without actually having to go into them.
Yeah. So I was actually I had with this in mind with this phrase here, remote state of satellite. So this contains the images currently present on satellite. Right. So this is what I would consider to be remote state. Right. You have
Okay. Gotcha.
like so this is, but yeah, I agree. This is exactly what we want to have, right? We want to know, hey, is it correctly what my satellite is? So I want to make sure that, you know, if something is not working, let's say, you know, someone's just like, hey, this is not, we don't see this functionality in the UI. You want to look and see, okay, is this what the thing has pulled, yes or not? Okay. Okay. Good. What else? We have this part. Yeah, the next step would be to define the APIs, right? So we need to define the APIs of ground control, like we have the interfaces, right? So now we need to define the APIs. And we had it really in the beginning, as I remember, right? We've been talking about like the technical details of those interfaces, and I think it may be interesting now to talk about the same thing again. We can offer the interfaces as REST APIs, which would make sense in my opinion. But also in parallel, we can also offer at least this interface here as in gRPC. Because with the gRPC interface, we could create a pseudo-synchronized satellite where the satellite would immediately be notified if his relevant list gets updated, and it can immediately pull these images, right? Because otherwise
or we could use libp2p for that.
Or we could use libp2p for that, right? This could be also an option.
Isn't that a bit too heavy?
I think we should do an HTTP API initially, but yeah.
Yeah, gRPC. I like gRPC more, but I agree that REST is probably better in the beginning. It's easier to do.
Yeah. I think we should definitely have a REST interface, but I think also
or not
like
even gRPC, but like any RPC, RPC, because it works really well for this kind of case where you have to synchronize between.
Yeah.
So guys, what do you think? Do we have a better understanding now about what ground control can do?
For me, absolutely. Yeah.
I think this is really good.
This is like a 6 months to a year of work, by the way. This is a lot of stuff, especially so just based off of intuition, but Philip, you probably know more than I do here. What's going to be really tricky here is the authentication part, for sure.
Yeah.
and basically pushing back from satellite to ground control, and just doing that mapping, that one-to-n mapping in a neat and clever way, so that it basically is flexible enough in the future.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there is definitely a lot of work if you want to create it flexible and powerful. I mean, if we talk about capabilities, or dealing with thousands of registries, right? So you want to make sure that one soul somewhere in a can be able to deal with this thousands of satellites.
Yeah. And also we need changes to the satellite core.
I think that like initially you'd want to implement this without authentication and then figure out authentication
true.
afterwards.
True.
I'm currently thinking of something like SPIFFE, right? Something like SPIFFE can be, but I'm not entirely, let's say, understand the details of how this can be done in SPIFFE, but I'm just from my, let's say, broad guess, I would say that SPIFFE could be something to look at for the authentication and authorization.
Maybe
That
we
can
could
be.
ask the guys in Harbor who do the auth flow there, like once we get there, what do they recommend? I also have some friends in Grafana who work on the auth side of things there, so maybe they could take a look at it. Because this is really not my area of expertise.
Mm-hmm.
Like I promise that there's a solution out there. I just don't know what it is right now. I can't say out of the top of my head like this is what we should use.
Yeah. So we have a few options here, and then we need to kind of evaluate those options and see what is the best one for satellite. But there are definitely a few options, which is not bad. I mean, bad would be if there would no options at all, or no options to our knowledge.
What I would do after this is scope it down to a digestible format, so that Prasant can actually start working on it, or Rod can actually start contributing to this into tangible tasks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the next part would be here to create, I think this is more of a task for Prasant, is to create our RFP for the Harbor community. And we talked about the Harbor community RFP. I mean, we have one, so maybe we need not creating a new RFP, but maybe we can create extend the RFP from Roald. I mean, don't be scared, because things take some time here to get approval. Don't be discouraged. Like, let's say scared, not discouraged, because things take some time here. But I think what Prasant can do here is extending the proposal that Roald started with the part that is ground control related. And then we have the ground control, kind of describing ground control, the functionality and the use case and how it's working. We can, highlight it here, and then we need to identify for Prasant let's say the part that might be relevant for his for the scope of, or the duration of this next 2 to 3 months.
And keep in mind that we've discussed it before. I might bring in some people who are also interested in contributing. So there needs to be some clearly defined tasks that they can just pick up and start working on.
Yeah.
So backlog grooming is definitely needed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We need to definitely break it down in tasks again. But I think for today, it's a good, having good understanding about the ground control functionality and the scope and the capabilities. So what do you think, Jan? So you, from the user perspective?
Yeah, I'm sorry I wasn't much contributing, but yeah, I followed almost everything you said about ground control, and I think I agree with most of the architecture and the main pipelines. I mean the main hurdles that have to be crossed to be good. But I agree with what is shown there and written. So I think it's a good idea. I look forward to see it. Actually,
Did you had on your side on the CNCF, SNCF, not CNCF,
Yeah.
SNCF? Did you had similar considerations or discussions on your side? Or
about making something like ground control, or having the need to have something like ground control in our use case.
yeah, I mean, solving the problem of how to distribute images to the edge, and also how to control the distribution, right? So something similar like ground control, maybe.
Yeah, we have that discussion. Right now, we do not use something like this because I mean we are based on Rancher, and I mean we have some kind of proxy harbor that we store in our edge network, and we hope that our network will be sufficient to address these issues. But I mean, at scale, we know we are gonna have some difficulties to address every edge location. So we think that some kind of this kind of solution could be a very good evolution to what we do. It's just that right now we don't have that much edge locations deployed, so I mean it's not needed right now. So by the end of the idea for us is to have maybe something by the end of the year, maybe to test it out. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
So I don't have much to add right now. I don't have much time to work on it, but as soon as I can, I'll try to find ways to contribute a bit more than just saying okay to everything.
Good. Thank you.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Did Prasant and Roald, is it clear? Like, does it make sense?
For me, yeah. So
okay.
Yeah, I mean, Prasant has already, started contributing and also made some changes to, I mean, for starting with the pipeline a bit, but also on the satellite core. I think I wouldn't be too discouraged, Prasant, if you don't understand everything here at the moment, because we have a few weeks of thinking and discussing ahead of you, right? So we've been more into this problem space a bit, like for multiple weeks and months, discussing the different areas here. So don't be discouraged if you don't understand everything correctly, or if you don't understand everything. But I would, don't hesitate to ask. Don't hesitate to ask in the satellite core. Say, hey, I don't understand why we need this. Or why do we need this functionality? What does it bring? And I think it also highlights that we need to articulate and express the problem and the solutions in more concise way, because we have a lot of knowledge that is, let's say, we have a lot of context that we didn't mention here, and I think from someone who is outside like you, you don't have this context, and this makes, of course, things more difficult to understand, and we might fail to express this context. want to not express, but also outline this context and mention this context or the details of the context. That's why it's important that you ask questions if you don't understand something, and don't be discouraged from asking questions.
Also, we can completely miss stuff that you will see when you implement it. So don't take this as like the 10 Commandments written in stone. So it is likely that this is going to change when you implement it.
Exactly. So the difficult parts, or the parts that there are some parts that we didn't talk about because it was not clear to us either. Right?
Okay. Got it.
Okay.
Yeah, fine. So far, I have overview of the ground control, and I already mentioned in the previous meet, like weekly sync, right? So I've been exploring the ground control parts, and it was just So the one question was, where does the ground control actually exist? So that was the one question, like, do we had it over the config to the satellite? But the best way, we don't. So actually, we can't go into every satellite and configure it. So keeping it with the central registry and like basically it's a central part where we control all the satellites over the all edge locations. So yeah, I'm gonna.
Yeah, I mean, control sounds a bit like an RPC, like downstream. So I think it's more the ground control presents the information and the satellite fetches the information, right? So the control is on the satellite side, right? So the satellite is, let's say, not obliged, but it's decides when it needs to fetch this information. So ground control, I would really focus that ground control is the one that provides the information, is the information provider, and the satellite is the one in control and decides, do I want to have this list or do I need to have this list? I mean, currently there is no option for satellite to make a decision, but I'd say in a context where the satellite is running out of connectivity and things like this, the initiative part should come from the satellite. Right? So the satellite is fetching the configuration. Satellite is fetching the images or the list of images that needs to pull, right?
Okay.
But
Fine.
yeah,
we can discuss that in more detail because this is one of the more interesting parts of this. Is how imperative ground control is, and how does the interaction between ground control and satellite look like exactly, but I don't think we can fit it in to this one now.
Okay.
But satellite, fundamentally speaking, the satellite core needs to be fully independent because, again, you have to assume that you lose network connectivity at any point in time.
Yeah, satellite should be kind of a sustained connectivity. Yeah.
Yeah, I got that. Yeah.
For indefinite amount of time. Okay. All right. I think we're already over our time, our planned time. I'm not sure if you want to stick around. If we want to discuss about the PRs, the current PRs that we have on the harbor satellite. If not, you can drop off. And if you have time,
I have to leave. Sorry, guys, but good meeting overall, I think.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'll stop the recording then, and or I can keep running. I mean, it's for the records. Okay. So thank you, everyone, and
thanks.
Yeah, if you want to stick around.
So I also gotta head off. I got a meeting in a few minutes. So
all right.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting.
Yeah.
So Prasant, it's probably me and you.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at your PR. So you mentioned that it is finished now, right?
Yeah.
Let's take a look. Okay. Make changes. Okay. Okay. Okay, unused constants. Why is it unused? Where does it say it's unused?
On part of that commit, like if you go into total files change, so you will have the exact thing. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it's hard-coded. Okay, good. Satellite test. All right. Good.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we can merge this one. Let's get this merge pull request, huh? Congratulations, your first
Yeah.
merge request.
Thanks a lot. Should I start working on the garbage check ground control, or
Yeah,
should I
so
start working with the proposal and then get the proposal right, then start like
exactly. So I would suggest that you I can share this picture with you.
yeah.
Let me just click this SVG and I'll share this. Let me just okay, I'll share this image afterwards and I'll share this on Slack channel and you can
that
pick
would
this
be
up.
great.
If I share this with you now, it's yeah, it's shared as a XML file.
Yeah, no issues then.
Then I would suggest, yeah, start working on RFP. That you kind of review the video again and understand how you can formulate this into a concise language for the RFP. Or you can use this this diagram again, or you can extend it if you want to. And yeah, and then if you have this information, yeah, you could yeah make an update there, right? I think when you want to work on the coding side, I think on the coding side, if we on the coding side, I would suggest that for the simplicity reasons, we put the ground control in the same repository.
Okay. So yeah, another thing, like if in case I have this one exciting question for me, like how are we gonna deploy satellites? Like do we let that the user handle it, or we are going to orchestrate the satellite ourselves, or what's the way we are going to approach that?
So the satellites, I think unfortunately we cannot deploy the satellites, right? Because this is like a really, really complicated task and there are too many variables and different environments how we can do this. So I think the only way what we can provide here is we can provide a satellite binary, right, as an artifact that the user can download, or we can provide satellite core as an image, right? So I think this is the two ways how we can provide the artifacts, and I think the only thing that we can provide to the users are the artifacts. Maybe we can provide compose files, things like this, but in the beginning, I think it should be just the artifact itself, and the complexity of the satellite is not yet big enough to justify something like a compose, right? Because it's not that much, right? So I would not justify compose.
So that's why we are always keeping like the satellite to be independent of anything. So the move maker is actually the satellite. So satellite is the one to make the move here. So it goes into the ground control and actually I'm here. So give me the list of images that I need to fetch, and ground control gives it's the list of images. So go and fetch this. and it just goes straight into the remote registry and pull the images from that.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
You got it correctly. Yes.
Okay. Mhm.
Exactly.
So
Mhm.
yeah, fine then. Ground control part, and do we actually have to store the list of images for each satellite, right? And how are we gonna index those satellites? Like, what's the way we can index the satellites to be of this kind?
Well, the satellite is the one that registers itself to the ground control, right? So there is kind
Okay.
of a registration token. We need to have some authentication method, and as we discussed today, it is not yet defined, or it is a bit of a more of a tricky situation. We need to put in more brain power into that to figure out the different
Okay.
options, how this can be done. But let's say in a broad way, there will be kind of a registration token issued by the by ground control, and then with this registration token, the satellite can register itself and say, "Hey, I'm the satellite. I'm allowed to register myself. You know, I'm old satellite, whatever the
Okay.
name there is, right?" So it can be a generated name, but it can also be a name that the user provides, right, when he's installed satellite, and then um, the list of images, it's going to be probably
Okay.
not
Okay.
bound to the satellite itself. So we maybe should bound the list of images or the list of OCI artifacts on the ground control side. We should bound the artifact list to a tag or a group,
Okay.
right? And then the satellite will bound itself to the group or the tag, right? We should not have a couple the list of artifact to the satellite. So there should be no coupling between list of artifacts to the satellite. It should happen over a group or tag.
Okay. Just
My
like in
opinion.
Harbor. Okay. 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 Got it.
Yeah.
So just like we have the user groups in Harbor, like user groups.
Yeah. Yeah. You can think of this. Yeah. Well, groups are more permission, right? So it's more permission. Here is less a permission. It's more kind of a where do
Segregation.
I
Yeah.
what is the relevant data for me, right? So it's not what I have allowance to do, it's more what is relevant to me.
Okay. Got it. So then authenticating the satellite would be a tricky part here. So we need to.
Yeah, I would focus this maybe a bit later, not in the beginning.
Yeah.
And yeah, we will probably discuss this a bit in a later stage. But I think for you to start with, you can start creating a ground control project, right? Extend the pipeline, setting up a server application, a ground control, right? So that ground control main, and there's like a starting thing, and you have REST APIs, right? So
Okay.
you can already not start coding it, but also kind of define the issues, what you're gonna do, right? So I think it's important, like to say what you think you want to do, or not think, to say what you plan to do, right? Is an issue, describe it in a formal way, and then this will also kind of transparently, give an overview
Okay.
about what you want to do, and provide you feedback before you start coding, and then maybe what you coded is not in line what you had in mind, and this is not what you had in line we had in mind, and this will avoid let's say
Okay. Okay. Fine.
unnecessary work on your side. So
Yeah. Sure.
suggest to go and create issues and specify what you're going to do it. So what you plan to do and what do you think is a good solution in here, right? You can use images, you can use video, you can make a quick recording, right? You can just record it and attach to your recording and diagrams, things like this. This makes it all easier to follow your thoughts and try to understand. But yeah.
And I also one another question. So if you mind, can I go?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So not with the project, but like, am I contributing enough, or should I do more things? Like, I feel like it's kind of slow. What do you feel like? Do I need to increase the pace, or?